So, kind of at the launch and measure stage, so I want to talk about just the process of testing and measuring and all that fun stuff, which is always, I don't know why I always end days with like numbers and things. Because I'm like, yeah, everyone's super awake. All right, so how to run high impact tests. We break this down. In the first step, you have to set up a hypothesis, and we're creating that essentially when we do our 15-point audit. When we look at our 15-point audit, we find the opportunity area. We just need to put it into the form of a hypothesis. Ready? Then you build it. We talked a little bit about building in terms of whether it's an iterative test that you run within a visual editor, or it is within a split URL test that you'd be using landing page builders in a tool to use for split testing. There's validate, optimize, scale, or abandon. So these are kind of like, this is what can happen during any testing process. Okay? So first, when it comes down to hypothesize, right? Your hypothesis will come from the opportunity areas pointed out in the 15-point audit. Right? Remember here? Okay? I said, we don't need to touch the offer right now. We don't. Trust, that's marginal gains if I'm trying to increase that. I don't think that's going to actually move the needle at all. That could go either way. Here is my opportunity. That's where I need to focus. Right? That is where I'm going to be spending my time for this test. So I could say something to the lines of, I believe that by removing two form fields and highlighting the section so that you can actually see it will increase more form starts and more form submissions or something like that. And I'll know that when I see X, right? It all comes down to this. And this is going to be in your, this is in the Elite Workshop area in the dashboard, which is a hypothesis worksheet. This kind of breaks down how you break up, like how hypotheses work in my world and how I look at them. We're only going to be looking here though, right? So really how I construct it is because we observed A and feedback B, which generally this is coming from the 15-point audit, we believe that doing C for D will make E happen. That is what we're going to be, that's kind of also derived from the 15-point, but is what you believe to happen, what you're going to be testing. And then we'll know this when we see F and obtain G. So we'll know this when we see a response of. So get kind of good at saying, like, if it's a minor change, like, did that really matter? Likely it didn't. Likely it won't be statistically significant. So we'll know it when we see at least this threshold. It gets you trained into using like inputs and giving a desired output and then coming up with the process to get there, right? But all we need to really focus on for this, that's it, is we believe that doing C for D segment will make E happen. And generally for us, our segment's going to be all for this stuff. We don't want to get too crazy there. I think I need to get you all links to this. I meant to have that in there. Sorry, Kevin. It's the standard sheet we've been using for growth. Which goes through kind of like ideation and then prioritization. This is just a good resource to have, but like in there we talk about like our hypotheses, and like anybody on the team will be breaking things down. Like here's what I observed, here's what I think will happen, here's what it'll take to get done, and kind of think about things like that. This will help from a prioritization standpoint. Again, not necessary for this cycle, but I wanted to point it out because it's something that we focus on here a lot. Cool. So, build and validate. All tests must run to the point of statistical significance. All right. So, let's throw it out on the table. Okay. Calculating statistical significance. All right, so statistical significance reflects your risk tolerance and confidence level. For example, if you run an A/B testing experiment with a significance level of 95%, this means you determine a winner. You can be 95% confident that the observed results are real and not an error caused by randomness. So that there's an actual change due to what was actually changed. It's not statistical noise. It also means there's a 5% chance you could be wrong, that wasn't there, that there was a level of noise there. And that comes down to different levels of your significance level, your confidence rate, as well as your power interval, but we're not going to get into powers. This is important, and this comes down to the idea of risk versus reward in testing. A lot of people are like, I need to run a test to 99% significance. No, you don't. That is really, really high and requires an obscene amount of traffic to get done. Or it's really, really high, requires a good amount of traffic to get done, and has to be like the biggest lift in the world. Okay, so really what this says is you kind of have to play, you know, it's kind of a game in that, like, what's your risk tolerance? Like, I've run tests where I'm like 90% is fine, because I'm okay with taking the chance that I could be off. You just monitor it more, and you make note of it in your work. So when you archive this stuff, like, hey, this was a 90%. It had an increased level of risk. It's just good to know. So something there. But here's how it's done. So calculating it the hard way. So for a given conversion rate, let's say P, and number of trials, N, standard error is calculated as standard error, SE, equals square root of P times 1 minus P divided by N. To get to the 95% range for conversion rates, do the following. P%, the P% plus minus standard error times 1 divided by 96. If no overlap between those, the test is either the clear winner or loser. Or just use the internal tool. Who cares about that? You don't want to do that. I was hoping someone thought I was serious there. Yeah, don't do that.
That's the way I do it.
Only way to do it, brother. But yeah, so the internal tool is good enough. Okay, they do have, you know, like, I mean, I think they have different models they use. I'm not even gonna pretend to know what they are, but it'll break it down for you, and I'll kind of explain what the hell's going on in here so you can understand what's happening. So between these are the conversion rates for 3 different variants that you can see there. All right, and so you can see initial volatility at the beginning, then you can start seeing when a clear winner starts coming through. You're going to see something called you have the conversion rate, and you have the conversion rate range and the interval, right? And then you also have your projected improvement, your chance to beat, which is their confidence level. They used to put 100% in there, but that's statistically impossible, so they eventually took that out. I complained a lot. It was a really big nitpicky thing, but I got really mad. And this is number of conversions, number of visitors. So first things first, you have your conversion rate versus your conversion interval. Your conversion rate is kind of a static number that's generally the midpoint of a conversion interval. So this is unlikely, like super unlikely, to be the final conversion rate when starting out, when scaled out rather. Because if you have like a large interval, there's a lot of potential for that to be anything. So like, look at this. If you have, in this case, like a 59.84% is what they're saying the conversion rate is. And there was an issue in the CRO space where people thought, oh, like, why am I not at 59.84? It's like, well, they didn't factor in the interval where it's a plus or minus 2.83, right? So there's a chance that it's 57.01, and if it's like 50, then there's a problem. But generally, we want to be shooting for, don't like think in fixed rate, think in ranges, right? And if you're working with clients, you're working with a boss, or you're working with anybody on the team, think that way, because it sets poor expectations. So that's the one right there that you can see. And then the interval is that plus or minus. So the interval of your page is most likely to perform within. The smaller the range you get, that's the higher the statistical power of the experiment. So if you can knock that down to within like 1 and 2%, that's pretty good, right? And in this case, like we had, we didn't have a ton of traffic for this, which was interesting. I was at a split test conference, which was funny because they totally had this wrong. We're like, oh, it doesn't look like you had enough traffic for this. And I go, I had enough conversions for it. Like, we had really, really high conversion rates where it was like, I mean, we're looking at between 52, 56, and 59 on the 3 variations there, right? So it's not a matter of traffic when you're testing, it's a matter of conversions, and I'll kind of dig more into that when it comes to scheduling. And hey, that's the interval. Cool, pop quiz, what's wrong here? If you can't see it, I'm sorry. There's 4 variants here. We have one that says chance to beat is at 95.9% up here. We have one that says 92, that's the control, This one is turned off. It's really far away, so I'm sorry about that. This one has 3 conversions, and this one has 2, and this one has 0. So when you're working with testing text, it's going to look like something's like a winner, but you want to make sure you have a minimum number of conversions before you do that. That's 5 total conversions. You're not going to make any decisions off of 5, right? At minimum, each variation needs 100 conversions. And conversions can be whatever you're defining, leads generated, purchases, anything like that. Even in some cases, if you're looking at micro-conversions, clicks can help as an indicator. And I'll show you, really, I just try to measure everything, like at each step. I looked at, if I'm starting at the top of the funnel with a lead magnet, I will measure all the way down through our upsell for Activate Lab Now. I know I'm not going to get statistical information at that point, but I like to see it, right? It's just good to have those numbers. But sometimes you don't need to go that route. But that's just me. At a minimum, each test should be run for at least 1 week, right? And then you want to make sure to select tests based on the value of the metric, or really the weight of the metric, okay? And here's an example of that. We had an old school sales letter here that I was like, I bet I can beat that with a kind of prettier page. Totally think I can do that. And hey, looking good, 24% more clicks, yeah. Let's pop bottles. No, we shouldn't. 42% more sales here. Okay? So that's why I like to kind of break down, get at least to the sale level on things. Since there was no real lead generation here, I was measuring clicks, but when I look at lead magnets, I go, all right, how many did we get there? What's the click-through rate on the entry point offer page? What's the take rate from the order form? And then what's the take rate for the upsells, right? Because what that tells me, and what's really interesting when we start thinking about landing pages, especially if we're going to be thinking about pages for e-com, right? Pushing people that are going to purchase something right off, or not even just e-com. If you're going to go from a page, click through, and buy, we might be thinking the landing page needs work when it's the order form that needs work, because it's a 2-stepper if you're looking at only orders. So you do need to contextualize those things, right? We fell into that trap here, and we're fixing it now, but we were like, gosh, we cannot get out of this rut. Why can't we get to this, the old days? Why can't we get back to the 10% on these? And we just kept trying new sales pages or sales landing pages, and man, we were off. It was the order form that was screwing it up. We were getting clicks, like what is going on? And then boom, we figured it out. There's an influx of mobile traffic, and our mobile experience on our order form sucked. We didn't have to run so many damn landing page tests because we didn't prioritize those things correctly. So if you're doing ones for click-throughs for purchases, keep that in mind. Just, food for thought. Cool. Moving on. I wasn't dramatic there or anything. Hypothesize, build, validate, optimize. So do you have a plan B, and is it worth trying again? So if something fails, or do you have something else to do, or is it even worth doing, right? Another thing to think about is, do you have any additional ideas for improvement based on your analysis that could swing the result? So when you're looking at these types of results or these opportunities, because testing is cyclical. You come up with an idea, build it out, try it out, see if it worked or not, make a recommendation and try it again. They should all feed each other, right? Do you have any additional ideas for improvements that could swing it either way? Or if you thought something like, ooh, I'm glad we didn't do that, and you can make note of that. Were there external forces that could have skewed the data? These are the biggies. Forgotten holidays, major world events, forgotten internal promotion. We have to talk about these things a lot when we show all of our metrics on Wednesdays. We might have a week where we're like, gosh, man, we're not running that much paid traffic. We have this many trials. That's amazing. And it goes, well, we mailed it. So we use the same kind of structure on the back end, which could make you think if you're running a split test and that structure was your goal, that could swing it. Or maybe you sent an email to a test page that because of something called either the primacy or the novelty effect, it would swing results there. The primacy effect being that people have to relearn how to use the page, and it generally at the beginning it gives a better preference to the old page, and that's more for returning visitors. Also, again, for returning visitors, the novelty effect is it's something new, so we're going to play around with it. That happens to us a lot. Because we're in marketing education here, and people on our list are devoted, I'd like to say, and they like to kind of see what we're doing. Even if they have the stuff, they'll go through the funnel again to see what we did differently, which screws with our numbers a lot. Thanks. But if it did work, do the results hold when you're tested across a different offer, channel, or avatar? That's when you can start really figuring out how to scale these things out, right? So a new headline may work for Facebook traffic, but not referral. New price test may work for one product, but not another. Things like that. And we try to test things across multiple channels and at least 3 offers before we make a call when we're looking at these things. Hypothesize, build, validate, optimize. Finally, scale and abandon. If it worked, initiate a responsible rollout process. This goes back to making sure that it works across different offers, avatars, and those. Like say if one landing page, like that one I showed you, that was the book that worked for the metrics guide, and didn't work for the blog post template. If we could have just blindly put that one out, but we tested it on other things just to make sure, and we're like, oh well, this isn't a slam dunk across the board. Like we'll keep it for the ones that it worked, but we need to figure out what's going on here, right? I know we want to have solidarity across things, but if everything's kind of within your brand guidelines, you should be fine. We want to make sure you have a responsible rollout process to ensure the results are holding across all campaigns, channels, and landing pages. Here's an example of one we're doing right now. We're trying, like I said, that whole thing about order forms. We have a new order form we're trying out. It's more of a traditional cart that for when we do kind of those bigger sales that we do at the end of the year, that you can actually add something to cart versus buy multiple things all the time, which will make things a lot easier for us and with customer success. So, I mean, there is data collected now. I had launched, I was writing this when I launched this test, and so I was like, ooh, I can show them this. But you can see we have one on a full-priced execution plan for $21 or $20-something, flash sale at $7, and then I did that on 2 other ones, just to see hey, different price points, different ways to articulate it, because it's coming from an email versus coming from a direct source, and those types of things. So it's really trying to get a handle on, does this work? Is it offer agnostic, and is it channel agnostic? So you have Facebook, email, and then stuff coming from Google as well. So if it didn't work, document the result, including a why theory, and revert to your control, and move on to your next test and project. Right? So if it did work, find a responsible way to scale it out, so test it across different things. If it didn't work, start figuring out why, and then start asking yourself before you just move on, be like, if you had some plan B, it's is it worth trying that? Right? Is it worth trying this other approach? Or from what you learned here, is it worth taking another stab at it? Is it worth taking the time? Remember I said there's only 26 tests you can run a year, essentially. Landing page tests, you can run a lot of them because you're really pushing segmented traffic, but true tests, you can only run about 26 a year, right? So, and this kind of goes back to the growth sheet here, where in our status we talk about in progress, completed, did it work, and we just, under those, yes, here's why, no, here's why. Simple things. There's tools that do this for you, but this is free, so just kind of get it to you. It works pretty well. So, so we're getting kind of close to the end here, looking at how to schedule a test, because this is super important. You don't want to run a test into kind of forever, because if you run it into forever, you're making the assumption that there will be some sort of change between the 2 variations, but there's actually 3 possible outcomes to a test. It's lift, loss, null. And if you run something into perpetuity, you're assuming the null is not an option, which is going to invalidate the test. So you need to make sure that you have a finite period of time to work within. So the first thing you need to ask is, do I get at least 100 conversions per variant in at most 4 weeks? I choose 4 weeks because it's about the month level where cookies kind of go bye-bye for people. So that's kind of why I look at that one. Here's a super nice cheat sheet. If you were to run, if you had minimum conversions per variation per day, so it'd be, if you have 2 variations, that's actually 58 conversions you'd need. But if you can run a test in 7 days if you get 29 conversions per variation, right? And then say you're like, nope, don't get that, move to the next one. You're like, oh, I get 15 though. So it's a 2-week test. Cool. So this is a nice little cheat sheet. I'll also show you a calculator that you can use. Very important. Make sure your test always completes an entire week, like I said. People act very differently at different days of the week. People act very differently at different points in the day. People just act differently in general. And really one of the first things you'll see here is, like, I talked about primacy and novelty effects. There's always initial test volatility because of primacy and novelty effects. You have to let that ease out. And the best way to do that is to run it out for a full week. Some people, I don't do this anymore because it's too much time. If you want to run a super clean test, you wait until volatility is over, then run it for a week from there. I don't do that anymore because I truly believe when you're running tests, it's a kind of these two sides fighting of exploration, and it's not the best word, in exploitation of learnings. So I could spend all my time exploring something, but only reap the rewards for like just a fraction of that time, because test results degenerate, things change over time, like design schemas change, like your traffic sources change, all sorts of things change. Your offer could just get tired, right? Things change, so I generally go for shorter periods of exploration to a level of risk that I'm okay with, and then we'll then push out to try to exploit more of those gains, because it is all a balancing act there. This is a great duration calculator and split testing tool from convert.com. You put in existing conversion rate, expected improvement. And expected improvement, one of those things, this is fun just to play around with, because you can start going through some scenarios and seeing whether a test is worth doing. So say you're like, and I have an example of this in a second, and I'll show you that, but this is just a fun calculator to play with, and it'll tell you things like, hey, this is the number of days, number of visitors you need. 6 days, round up to 7. Finish the week, always. Actually, unless you're doing it on promo traffic from like emails, because that's for like, and there's only 3 days to run the promo. Like, you'd obviously not do it for 7, okay? But stop. Don't just ask if you can test, ask if it's actually worth testing, right? So here's a fun little thing to do here. So is it feasible if I was to go, hey, you know, existing conversion rate's 3%. I expect to go to a 20%. I expect a lift of 20%, which isn't that much. There's 2 variations in the test. I see about 500 visitors, and I want 95%. That would take me 85 days to run, totally out of the question. And that's at a 20% lift, right? How about this? Say we have a 3% conversion rate, and I expect a 50% conversion rate, right? Number of variations, 2, 500. That drops it down to about 14 days. Then I need to ask myself, can I get this? Do I think it's possible to get a 50% lift? If you have a 3% page and it's like a high, like, and you might be able to pull that off, because it might just be it might be that honest company page, right? But you need to say, like, in order for me to get this done within a timeline that I see as feasible for me, I'd need to do that. I don't see that as possible. Or maybe it's one of those, I don't see that as worth it. That's only a 1.5, that's a 4.5% conversion rate. Is that really going to move the needle? Is that worth it? So is it feasible, and is it worth it, are things you need to ask yourself when you're looking at these, and these types of calculators will make you think that through a little bit more, right? Remember to work backwards. Based on my current conversion rate, can I expect that % lift? And always ask, is the potential lift worth the extra work and risk, right? Because when you're running a split test, there's no guarantees. You can have an amazing hypothesis, you can have an amazing, you've done all this research and all this stuff, you did the audit, you did this stuff. There are 0 guarantees that you're gonna see a lift. You could see a loss even, right? Because remember what I said at the beginning. We're not our own customers, we're not our own target market, we can get things wrong. Okay, we're we're generally too close to our products and our marketing. And we're often wrong, right? Those things can come back. So you need to ask yourself, before I do this, is it worth me putting the effort into making these changes? And is it worth the risk of it not paying off, right? So, all right, last thing. Moving into reporting results. Reporting results, fairly simple. You can do this whether it's, you can do it in a Word doc, like PowerPoint, however you want to do it. There's some technology out there that'll do it for you, but it's stupid expensive and not worth it, essentially. So what do we test? Variables, methodology, and context. What was the hypothesis? We've created that. What constitutes success? Remember that other section in hypothesis, but we'll know this when we see this. That's what's important. You need to know what constitutes success. If you don't know what success is, you're going to be falling into that trap of kind of, again, running a test into infinity. What actually happened? What were the key learnings? And what are the next steps? And finally, what other tests, if any, do the results of this test suggest or inform? So after you run a test, you should be able to answer all of these questions and report on those, whether that be to yourself, to your colleague, to other stakeholders. But go with this, and people will be great. It's also good to also show the different variants as well. Show images and those things. That definitely helps. Go back to that thing I showed, like when I had like 2 different variations next to each other and said this one did better. That stuff kills. I built a company off of that. It's amazing. So that kind of cuts things out at this point here. I know that there was a lot of stuff that kind of hit heavy at the end there in terms of how you use the tools that are out there, how you schedule tests. I think the things to take away here is kind of, and to look at how we're going to be doing kind of this entire execution cycle should be kind of looked at in these phases, where first phase, 15-point audit your page. Well, pick your page, then run the 15-point audit. If you have multiple pages and you can't pick between them, thank you. If you have multiple pages and you can't pick between them, then look at what has the most opportunity from the audit that you run. So run multiple audits. Get good at that, okay? Find out whether it needs to be an iterative test because it's something that's more on the offer side or articulation side, or if it needs innovation, it's more on the design side, okay? Once you have that, if it's a iterative test, run a visual editor split test. That's going to cut this execution cycle down relatively quickly because you don't have to create a new variant. If it's a design one, you're going to need to use a landing page solution to try something else out, okay? Then from there, you just plug in your stuff in the testing tool. Again, that takes 9 steps to do. Set your goal, and then make sure you know the schedule of time. Run it through that calculator and say, it's going to take me 14 days to run this thing, but I'll get this launched by the end of the cycle. So that's kind of that, and I have a little bit of action items here. So just what I just said, pick a page. This is, oh man, I put this in here? Nice. I thought I was thought ahead of that one. But yeah, this is kind of the way to break this thing down completely. So yeah, you guys know what this is. This is the main thing. Get good at doing these things, and then likely at some point you'll kind of have kind of the ability to be like, oh, that's the one I want to use, and you just kind of roll with it. So cool.
Cool, you guys, we did it! Woo! Thank you so much, Justin, and thank you all so much for joining us for the Split Test Your Landing Page workshop. And don't forget, we have a live Elite Q&A call on Thursday, February 8th, and that's going to be at 1 p.m. Central. So join us there. I know your brains are probably jello, so let things absorb.
Make them more jello with booze.
Yeah, let things absorb, unwind, and then ask us any questions, clarification on them. And thank you for joining us.
Woo!